Hey, what's happening, you guys? This is Coach Joel, and you are here either A, listening to the Icon Fitness podcast, or B, you're joining us live on the Icon Blueprint Facebook page. If you're joining us live, welcome. Welcome to the show. We have a really exciting show today. We're going to be talking about communication, and specifically communication for success. We're going to be talking about how your words matter when it comes to delivering a message and being able to find the success that you are looking for, both A, in business and also with yourself personally. To be able to help guide this conversation, I have a special guest. His name is Paul Edwards. He's a best-selling author and executive ghostwriter who does two things and two things very well: words and people. I'm super excited to be able to have him on the show today, and we're going to dive into communication to help you with your success. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Paul. Oops, hold on. Paul, there it is. Hey, there you are, Paul.
There I am.
There you
Yeah.
are.
How you doing? How you
I
doing, Joel?
I am doing good today. I went and got coffee. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I went and got coffee at a coffee shop, was doing some work, and sometimes you squeeze the paper cup too much and the plastic pops off and you don't notice and you
hmm
go to take a drink. I poured a quarter of my coffee on myself because I was talking to somebody else, and I was wondering, like, why am I not feeling it on my lips? And then all of a sudden I
Mm.
started feeling it on my stomach and on my pants. Um, and so, those are the times for me where I go, you know what, you could get mad or you could just laugh at this situation. And so that's kind of what I did today. I went, okay, I poured half the
Well,
coffee over here.
now you could. I mean, there's potential for a good class action lawsuit here as well. I mean, you could
Yeah.
always,
You know,
lawyer up and let her rip.
right now in Reno, Nevada, it's we got like 2 feet of snow, and so I had all of my like winter clothes on. So that's why I didn't feel it initially, because I was pouring it on multiple layers. So
Mm.
I didn't even get the chance of feeling like it was hot. Like
Oh, okay.
I couldn't even fake a lawsuit like that.
That's right. You
Um,
got to be in Florida for that kind
yeah,
of thing to
that's right.
work.
That's for that to work. How are you doing?
Uh, it would be difficult for me to be doing much better. Thank you. I appreciate the ask. Just extraordinarily well in all the key categories of life and business, and really just enjoying the ride.
Oh man, I love it. And one of the things we were talking about before the show started is that you started this business just over a year ago.
Just over a year ago, January 2020 was when I got my first real paying client, and the ball started rolling.
Yeah, and just to be able to real quick in just a sentence or two, what do you do?
It's evolving. I started out ghostwriting content, and that has progressed into ghostwriting content for a lot of people, ghostwriting books. And I'm finding now that I think I have to evolve. I'm not declaring this in stone yet, but I think I have to evolve into a marketing and communications firm,
Mm,
because increasingly I'm finding myself leading a team and encountering people who need more. They need writing, but they don't just need writing. And if I just give them writing, it'll be doing them a disservice. They need strategy, deployment. Sometimes they need graphic and video and audio, assets that go along with the writing and all that
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
So I'm thinking that might be the direction I have to go.
And so you started off ghost writing, and for people that don't know what ghost writing is, what is it that you're doing, and how is that helping your clients?
I've come up with a way I like to describe this. Ghostwriting is kind of like being a therapist on one end and a ventriloquist on the other.
Mm,
So, so all through my life, I've been a mimic, right? I can imitate other people's voices and imitate their mannerisms and their voice. And as a result of going through the school of hard knocks, I've also developed quite a set of ears for listening to people.
mm,
And I've developed a set of skills to get people talking. And once they start, if you phrase these things correctly, it's usually difficult to get them to stop.
mm-hmm.
And In the case of writing a book or content, that's an excellent thing because you want them spewing out a nonstop degree of content so that you can turn it into excellent written content for consumption.
Yeah.
On the other end, right, you've got this task of projecting the voice of that person rather than your own. And so I found that when I was writing this content, one of the best ways to proofread it was to read it back to myself out loud in their voice, imitating
Mm,
how they would speak, and then judging, is this, when I write this, is this the way Paul Edwards would write it, or is this the way Aaron Walker or Tom Gaddis or
yeah.
Jared, golly, I'm forgetting all the last names now, would write it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that all plays into it. The and I think we're going to get to the value at some point. But really, what happens is people get back their time, and in exchange, they get deployable, done for you assets that they can put out there. And the audience, even people in the audience who know the influencer well, can't tell the difference.
Mm. So, and this is a question that I ask majority of my clients who come on, if they're entrepreneurs and they have small businesses, is what is the hell that you're solving? So you've explained now what you do, but what is it that somebody is coming to you and going like, oh my gosh, that this is like, I am in such dire need, or this is I don't know what I need, but this sucks.
Mhm.
What is that hell, and what's the heaven that you take them to?
In the case of so many people, Joel, I've heard you touch on this before as well. In the case of so many people who have built up a level of expertise, insight, knowledge, experience, whatever in a specific area, there is an encyclopedia of knowledge between their ears. And if they're invited to speak at a conference or appear on a podcast, that's easy enough to get it out because you're speaking authentically to who you are.
Yeah.
But what happens when you switch that to try to put it in print is that you lose all of the tonality and the body language and the facial expressions and the eye contact and the sense of whether or not people are listening to you. And on their end, the sense of whether or not you're listening to find out what they're interested in.
Mm,
My aim is to give you all, as much of that as you can give back in print so that when that communication hits, the people on the other end of the line want to read it, they enjoy it, they respond to it. It moves the needle in your business. So whether you're after donations or whether you're after, well, not votes, I don't do politics, but whether you're after
sure, sure.
donations, whether you're after dollars, whether you're after engagement, whether you're after likes, comments, doesn't matter. My job is to put a message in front of that person in your voice that is likelier than the message you would write by yourself to get them to respond.
So you're basically, and I'm going to put it in for me, is that you're saving them valuable time and giving them the reward of the correct message.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because if there's anyone out there who runs a small business, you know how long it takes to be able to write out an Instagram post or a Facebook or write out a blog or be able to put out content. You already have so many different hats that you're wearing throughout the day. And particularly when you start off new, being able to try to handle all of those things, that is for sure, for me, that would be a heaven. If my content can be written and it's solid and it's bringing returns, it's like you said, it's getting the people to be able to come work with the knowledge that I know that I can provide without me taking the energy to try to write the exact catch for them to come in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it comes from understanding what is your offer to them and how do we put that in terms that's not going to confuse them,
Yeah.
right? And then on top of that, how do we inject what we write with an appropriate balance of emotional versus intellectual content? Because what a lot of people do, especially with the written word, is they become very clinical, right?
Mm,
they, like I said, all of a sudden people cannot see your face. They can't hear your voice. They can't see if you're looking at them. They don't know. All they got is this message.
Yeah.
And it can be, dry, it can be as dull as watching paint dry,
Yeah.
or it can be evocative and yet persuasive. Well, it makes a good point. And at the same time, it can gently, lovingly, not with being rude or obnoxious, but it can be a little bit confrontational, right? It can be a little bit,
Yeah.
you're at a crossroads and you need to make a decision, and here's
Yes.
what you need to do, right? If you're
Yes.
ready to take that leap.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Which leads us into, I love that. It leads us into communication when it comes to success. Now, communication when it comes to success, that's all going to rely on the individual. Whether the success is being able to get your kids down for the night, right? Or success is being able to close on, a huge deal, or be able to get a new client. What we say really truly matters. And to you and in your field, how important is communication with what you do?
I, uh, I've seldom found a more important subject, and one of the reasons I say that, Joel, both you and I come from a very biblical background.
Correct.
One of the great frustrations for me, for many years, was sitting in a church service week after week, being told what the Bible says, but not necessarily why it says it.
Mm.
Right? It's written originally in foreign languages we don't understand if we're native English speakers,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I uncover these days, as I'm self-teaching the Hebrew language and making a concerted effort to search it out, the more I'm realizing we have been told quite a different version of what's actually written there.
Mm.
And in many cases, I feel like, sort of like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, where he says, there's only one possible explanation. Either no one told me or no one knew. Right.
Yes.
And so I'm going through this, I'm on this journey. So the practical reflection of that, right, is that when you are attempting to make yourself understood, there are some basic things that I think most people, even in the face to face with the ability to communicate with the full force of your presence, they just don't understand um, when to use them and when not to.
Mm.
They don't understand how to say it versus how not to. They don't understand who to say it to, right? And maybe
Mm.
who should not be privy to that information.
Mm.
Um, and I'm not talking here about being dishonest. I'm talking about needlessly disclosing things that person doesn't need to know, and they won't be harmed in any way, shape, or form by not knowing it,
Yeah.
right? It's funny you mentioned the example of getting your kids to bed, right?
Yeah.
Um, to give you a practical example of this, for years, I would, shout and yell to try to get my boys to go to bed. But I discovered something about them. The more I attacked them from the front, right, head on, saying "get to bed," right,
Yeah.
the more they resisted me. So then one day, I was sitting on the sofa. My oldest one walked in. He did something his mother didn't like. She, turned to me and said, "What are you going to do about this?" And I looked at him and I said, "Go ahead. Let's see what happens." Right?
Yeah.
You know, and all of a sudden I saw the instability come across his face, right? He doesn't now he's like, "Wait a minute, I'm being allowed to make this decision." And he immediately made the right decision without me telling him to do it.
Mm.
It's still communication. It's extremely persuasive, much more so than yelling at him. It just doesn't involve those words that people think it's plain English. How much more confusing can it be? Well, it depends on the type of person you're dealing with,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
It really does. I mean, some people take that order, no problem. You tell them, go to bed, and they go straight to bed. Other people, nope, not doing it.
Right. 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 And so being able to deliver, and it's it's interesting. Some people say like, well, it's not really what you say, it's how you say it, And I'm like, nah, it's what you say, how you say, the tone in which you say, Like our communication is vital, and I'm sure that took your son off guard when you
Yep.
said it, the way you said it, what you said, the tone, the way that you said it. I love what you said in terms of like it created this instability, right?
Hmm.
Because so often people want to, like what you're saying, hey, this is what I need you to do. They want to reject it just immediately, whether that's because they have, coping mechanisms or whatever the case is, and they want to reject it. But when you say, okay, I'm your leader, you make the decision, all of a
Yeah.
sudden there's this instability of like, wait, I have to make a decision. You always tell me what decision to make. And then they start going in their Rolodex and go, okay, what did they tell me to do in the
Yeah.
past? And so then they go, I don't want to feel this instability. So, oh, there it is. Let me pull this out and go, okay, I'm going to go do this. And you're just sitting there like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Not threatened. Yeah. Relaxed. No big deal.
I love it. I love it. So when it comes to your job, you have the hell in terms of people trying to deliver the message, but not the right message. What are the pitfalls that you see in communication? And again, this could be business, it could be personal, it could be relational. What are the pitfalls you see in communication that usually robs success? And I think you alluded to one with your son, but in business or in relationships, what are those pitfalls that you may see?
I think at the core, Joel, um, I talk about this principle of magnetism in my book. And the the main problem is most people are thinking principally about themselves, right? My interests, my concerns, my needs, my problems in the moment, that's what's on their mind.
Right.
So in the very first thing I lead off with in the book is I say become a magnet, not a pusher. And the way that this works is if you take two magnets and you put positive to positive and negative to negative, they're going to repel each other.
That's right.
But if you flip one of them around, they attract. And that's the physical principle that's mirrored in the spiritual, right? If you behave the opposite of the way most people behave, if you walk around as an others-centered, others-centric, generous, thoughtful person in your communication and back it up with your actions,
Mm,
you create an irresistible pull towards you. Now, the reason I lead off answering with that is that I think all the other stuff is academic because if we're still doing it mainly for ourselves, we're going to get mediocre results at best,
right.
right? So it has to start with this internal shift that is, to a degree, permanently satisfied that I will be taken care of so long as I remain fixated on helping and serving God's other children, right?
Mm,
From there, I think the pitfalls are practical, backwards practical applications of things that I do right side up. So most people on their social media feed are promoting themselves. Most people, not most people, I don't want to characterize broad
sure.
swaths of the population, but I want to say that the way of the world has always been self promotion, trying to garner attention on yourself. And the way of the media that I do is about uh, sort of putting myself in the picture while I am really celebrating someone else.
Mm,
I'm promoting someone else. I'm talking about someone else. I'm benefiting someone else. I just happen to be there. And so I'm inextricably linked with that person.
mm,
Right.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that creates a degree of trust in the mind of the listener or the observer because when they communicate with me, when I communicate with them, they're used to a certain essence reflected in the content that they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spell out some practical ways to do them. One of the ways I call it is pro bono publicity, right? Which is what you and I are doing right now,
Right.
where you're giving me the privilege and the opportunity to come on and talk to your audience.
Yeah.
Your audience is hearing what I have to say. They're getting value out of it. You're creating another great episode for your show and increasing your listeners. Everybody wins. But the principle is the audience trusts you to find content that's useful for them.
Right.
And that's what solidifies your bond. You don't have to get out there and talk about, oh, what a great guy Joel is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're already thinking that,
Totally.
right? Another one I call it not for profit is for profit, right? And this is aligning yourself with causes and interests that you believe in, and making the purpose of your business, a large part of the purpose of your business is to further fund and participate and elevate that cause. Right. For me, that's young men in the kingdom, right? That's these young guys, 18 to 29, starting out in life. Nobody's teaching them anything valuable. Nobody's helping them grow. Nobody, they feel totally alone, ill-equipped. They don't know what they're doing. And the world just keeps blowing up at them right in front of their face. And they don't know why.
Yeah.
And they need someone who's been around the block a little bit to sort of help them explain it and understand it so that they can begin to adapt to the reality.
Yeah.
Another one I call it, now this one, we've touched on already, persuasive in print, right? This is about writing effectively. The written word, most people can make themselves fairly well understood verbally. Body language is usually not a problem. Mm-hmm. But print, I find even people who are great speakers, great communicators in person, getting a COVID-19 age interruption here.
That's okay.
Most people who are even plenty of people who are really good at speaking, at interacting. And then I get an email from them, and I'm like, ugh. There's just a much better way to say that. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And then there's this other thing, which I didn't think of. I didn't think about in the beginning, but it's really become a powerful tool now. I call it the curator. And this has to do with communicating internally with yourself as much as anyone. And you make very firm decisions. This is who I am, and this is who I'm not.
Yes.
This is what I do, and this is what I don't do. This is who I hang around with, and this is who I avoid.
Yes.
This is who I serve, and this is who I'm not any use to these people over here.
Right.
By doing that, most of the people that you already don't want to hang around with, do business with, be in any sort of relationship with, will self-select out of your orbit, and you won't have to deal with them.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, those are some practical ways, and they represent the pitfalls. Most people say yes to far too many things they should say no to. Most people pay far too little attention to how they write. Most people are not active in the not-for-profit world. They're not volunteering. They're not showing up and helping. They're not investing, right? And most people are too busy trying to get the spotlight on themselves. Mm-hmm. And they may not always be like, I'm not accusing everybody of being Kardashians. I'm simply saying we haven't thought about it or devised another way to do it. And so it wins by default.
Right. Right.
So,
gosh,
hopefully that answers your question.
You know what? There's so many good parts that you talked about in there. In terms of like the magnets, one of the things that first came to me was, and you did it really well when we first talked, is I talk to people about ask more questions. Don't make as many comments, because when somebody else is in the driver's seat, you're getting valuable information, and they're being able to get whatever's on their chest or heart out. So there's this trust that's being built by being able to just ask questions. It's such a simple kind of concept, But I've told people, like, try to do an entire conversation where you don't say one thing. You don't comment once. You only continue to ask questions.
Mm.
And then ask them at the end, right? Or see at the end how they feel. And 9 times out of 10, they're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, man, you just gave me so much good advice, and I just feel so good." And you're just like, "I didn't give you any
I didn't
advice.
say anything.
Yeah, I just asked the right questions, right?"
Yeah.
And that's that magnet that you were talking about, right? When two comments are trying to go at the same time, it's just like, but when you flip it around, then all of a sudden you have a question and you have the answer, and now all of a sudden it's a very strong bond that's being created. And I mean, that just really popped to mind. And then the other one, which I think again drives to what you do and the importance of it, is print matters.
Hmm.
I have
Yeah.
noticed this a lot. A lot of people do, like, the Instagram, and they're la, 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 and they're talking to themselves, right? And then they go to do, like, they write something up, and there's grammar misspells, and their message doesn't sound the same as what they were saying when they were doing their selfie Instagram live post. And they're we're in such a fast-paced world that's like, oh, BTW instead of, well, by the way,
Yeah.
like, and people don't recognize what the message that they're sending in that print when they do that kind of stuff. Just like you said,
Yeah.
I thought that was so genius, where you go, ugh, I listened to you talk
Mhm.
and it was like, wow. Then you sent me an email and it was like, what, you didn't have enough time to breathe a little bit, write it out
Mhm.
so it sounded the same way that you speak. How often do you see that in terms of, like, oh wow, you present yourself really well. Oh wow, your email or text message to me was, eh. Does that happen often?
I'll tell you this, where I don't see it happen, where I see that the person is complimented both on how they present themselves in person, on camera, etc., and in print, is when they have a really good team built around them that includes a strong ghostwriter agency, somebody who knows how to write good email or social media or web content copy.
Yeah.
That's where you don't lose them on because if they encounter you first in print, right,
Hmm.
then obviously you want that part to be good. You might get a little bit more grace if they encounter you first in person and then in print. But what is optimal is if they encounter the same thing in both scenarios. Then they're like, this is really compelling. No matter where this shows up, I find myself agreeing with this guy and persuaded by what he says and intrigued at what he has to offer.
Yes. And which goes right back to the point, guys. If you don't got a ghostwriter yet, you might want to start thinking about it, right? Whether you have somebody on your staff or that you outsource. I believe there's probably a lot of people listening right now that go, ghostwriter? What's a ghostwriter? And, do I really need one? The answer is yes, guys. You do need one. It'll save you time.
Yeah.
It'll get the right message across.
Yeah, and unless you wonder, this is not Nicolas Cage with a skull on riding a motorcycle, right?
Yes, yes.
That's a different kind of ghostwriter.
That it is. Um, so we've touched up on a lot of this. What is communication? How do we see it when it comes to success? Is there any other short, hard tips that we can give the listeners when it comes to communication? I mean, you covered a lot in here that I already love, but is there anything else, if you could nail down one where it's just like, hey, when it comes to your communication, guys, really try it this way.
Well, I want to step a little bit further into what you emphasized was really good, that really resonated with you, Joel, and that is when you uh, when you turn it into a Q&A, um, you become a really effective communicator without saying much. So, in my search to better understand the Bible, I've done a lot of reading of the ancient rabbis and sages of Judaism. And there's a famous line. I forget which rabbi it's attributed to, but he asks a rhetorical question: "Who can resist a question?" Right?
Mm,
It's almost like the magnetism was recognized thousands of years ago before we had the internet, right? And but I want to build on that a little bit, and here's what I mean. Um, this world is designed for things to become powerful, useful, healthy, constructive, progressive, if you want, better, et cetera, through the process of bonding, right? There's no water, in other words, if hydrogen and oxygen don't bond.
mm,
There's no salt if sodium and chloride don't bond. And you can search for, there's no alloys if you don't bond steel, and I forget all the different ones. And I confess I'm stealing a little bit of this from Rabbi Daniel Lapin because I just love his stuff. I just
yeah.
dig into it nonstop. But um, in the Q&A, there is a bonding process. If you know what questions to ask people and when to ask them, and you can come at it from a sincere place, right? Going back to being a magnet, being magnetic instead of pushy. If you can come at it, you're not desperate to make sales. You're not attached to any particular outcome.
Yeah.
You're just being genuinely, sincerely curious and interested in your fellow human beings. Um, that's where I've found almost all of the magic
Mm,
that's brought about the success that I have in family, in business, in
mm,
spirituality.
mm.
Um, I ask God questions, right? Now, does He answer me out loud audibly? No. He usually reveals it either through my studies or through something in nature or through something that somebody says.
Yeah.
But He does answer,
Yeah.
right? Because by being genuinely inquisitive and unattached to the outcome, even with somebody like God, He's eager to answer those questions,
Yeah.
right? Same thing with my fellow human beings. I ask them. I have this succession of three questions. It's in the book, right? So if you want to order a copy, you'll find them.
Yeah.
Um, and I have used these questions for over 2 or 3 years now,
Wow.
and I have never had anyone decline to answer them. I've never had anyone not want to answer them, and I've never had anybody not answer them with a paragraph or two. Um, and they all lead to bonding, appropriate bonding, right?
Mm. Yes.
But bonding nonetheless. They all lead to exactly that kind of outcome you're talking about, where at the end of the conversation, you say, "How do you feel?" And the people say, "Oh, you've given me so much wisdom," right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, "I didn't say diddly squat." No, exactly.
Yes.
You utilize the bonding process. So when you're communicating, right? Um, we ought to have figured it out by now that statement against statement against statement, and you're in a Facebook debate, and we know where that leads. It leads absolutely nowhere.
Nowhere.
But question and answer, and not rhetorical, smart aleck lawyer, I'm better than you type of questions, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. We know those.
sincere, genuine, authentic, humble questions. They evoke the most incredible answers, and they really solidify that bond. So that's what I would add to it. That is sort of unmentioned up to this point. Not mainly because I this is something I've realized since writing the book, and didn't think to put it in there at the time.
Gosh, just diamonds right there. And we've mentioned this book a couple different times, and we haven't gotten the title of it. And on Facebook, if you can grab the book and show it, and then for our listeners on the podcast, give us an idea of this book.
So the book is called Influencer Networking Secrets: How to Build the Magnetic Influence, Meaningful Connection, and Profitable Publicity of a Radically Generous Entrepreneur.
I love it.
And available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and also on my website if you want to go that route. But it's it's a treatise on everything that I've used to build a series of back-to-back personal brands, businesses, all from scratch, all when I didn't know anybody, um, and all via leveraging a strong bonded network of people. to cultivate that clientele, to cultivate the systems and processes, to cultivate the capabilities that I'm, starting to leverage now to help clients with their marketing and communications.
And so, I mean, that sounds, I love it. And you're bringing back that bonding part, which I think for any of the listeners, guys, really tune into what Paul's saying here is that bonding process is so huge, utilizing that question and answer kind of process. But who would this book really be for? What would, if you could name somebody like, hey, this book for you, you got to read it.
I think you're going to be somebody who does what I call focusing on the invisible, or at least wants to know how that's done.
Mm,
You look at life, and I'm going to get specific, so I'm not going to stay vague here, but I need to cover the
sure.
theoretical first. You focus on the invisible. You look at life, and you see one person goes for a sale or to ask for a donation and gets rejected. And then, 2 days later, another person comes in asking for exactly the same sale or exactly the same donation and gets it. Why? Why did what was different, right? They made the same request,
Mm,
but one person succeeded and the other one failed. Why? Is it because of purely external features? Is it because of looks? Is it because of, color? Or is it because it's a man or a woman? Is it, no, it's not that. I have been approached by salespeople of both sexes and all races and all backgrounds and all that. And I buy from ones I like and I don't buy from ones I don't,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
But why do I like them? Well, that's all invisible, right? The
Right.
world wants us thinking of ourselves as purely physical beings, and we're
Yeah.
not. And so you have to understand the upside down approach to building true magnetic influence is done in the invisible. And it's not like all of a sudden I have some special set of eyeglasses that I can put on and see things that other people can't. No,
Yeah.
I have a communicative skill to get people talking about stuff that nobody else in the room wants to know, cares to know, even bothers to think to ask about.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I know the story from somebody's last, couple of weeks. I know what their present biggest struggle is, and I know what they're looking forward to in the future.
Yes.
And I treat people like living, breathing stories, not humps of, big clumps of, $9 worth of household chemicals.
Sure.
I,
Sure.
I treat them as they are. They're a living, breathing story. And when they get treated the way they're supposed to be, because that's what they are, they respond differently than
Right.
they do. That's the magic of this book. That's what it's going to unlock for you.
Wow. Wow. There it is. I love it. I love it. So just to be able to run through, guys, what Paul was talking about today in terms of your communication for success and what you really need to be taking a look at is being able to recognize that a fluid communication over all of your channels of communication matters. Your body language, your text, the written, the word, this all needs to be able to match up. Because yes, we've been talking a lot about business, but even when we're talking about our relationships, if what you're saying to your wife is not the same that when you're texting her or sending her an email or not sending her a card on her birthday, this is going to shuffle that communication. It's not going to be on the same channel. And so making sure that every type of communication, regardless of the channel, truly matters. Also, utilizing that bonding process that Paul talks about is huge. Being able to turn those magnets around, being able for the bond to happen through questions instead of comments is a great way to be able to start building that trust in communication, which does help with the invisible, which Paul talks about in his book. Paul, how do people get a hold of you?
The best way, I have a website, which is the Paul S as in Simon Edwards.com. And then if you'd like to reach out to me over social media, you can do it that way too. The handle is always the Paul S. Edwards. And other than that, just you can find the book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble if you'd like to pick up a copy. And also, I have a podcast too, which we're hoping to have you on pretty soon.
Yep.
And that's on iTunes and anywhere else fine podcasts are sold. And it's also called Influencer Networking Secrets.
There it is, you guys. I will make sure to put in the show notes all of those links to be able to get a hold of Paul and to be able to check out the book. Paul, I really enjoyed our time together today. You gave some incredible knowledge to the people that are listening. I wish you the best in your continued success of serving others and finding that success. Is there anything else that you want to say before we close out?
Joel, it was a pleasure joining you today. Thanks so much for having me. I wish everybody in the Ikon Fitness audience all the best and would love to connect with more of you when the time is right.
There you have it, guys. There you have it. Next week, we are going to be at the same place, same time, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. If you want to join on the Ikon Blueprint Facebook page, if you haven't joined the Ikon Blueprint Facebook page yet, head on over there. Ton of content that is delivered weekly, including these live videos. If you want to rewatch this, you can go onto YouTube, search Ikon Fitness, and you can watch it. Or, like Paul said, head on over to iTunes or any other platform, and you can find this podcast at Ikon Fitness, the Ikon Fitness podcast. All right, Paul, until next time, have a great day.
Thank you, my friend. You too.
All right.